Good evening and welcome to Asia Society. My name is Michelle Yun Maplethorpe and I'm Vice President for Global Artistic Programs and Director of the Asia Society Museum. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a Hamneshini event on survival justice with Morehshin Allahyari, featuring guest speakers Nima Behravan and Angelina Marie Michael Meitzler. This event is presented in conjunction with our fall exhibition, Rebel Jester Mystic Poet, Contemporary Persians from the Mohammed Afkhami Collection. The exhibition is on view through May 8th, 2022, and we welcome you to come for a visit. Time tickets may be reserved through the Asia Society website, and for those of you who are not able to physically come in person, you can access a virtual tour of the exhibition through our museum website. This evening is part of an exciting roster of fall programs. Other programs presented in conjunction with the exhibition include Masa Vedat, My Voice is My Home, a musical performance and poetry talk featuring Bridget Kibbe, Shane Shanahan, and Zara Hushmand on Saturday, November 6th at 7:30 p.m. And in December, a virtual book club featuring Brown Album with the author of the book, Purchista Kapoor, moderated by Human Majd on Monday, December 6th, 8 p.m. Throughout the run of the exhibition, I'll also be featuring a series of virtual artist studio visits, so please check out our website for these and many other offerings. Also coming up from November 17th to 19th, Asia Society Museum will be hosting our biannual Arts and Museums Summit. The 2021 Summit, Reimagining Museum Narratives in the 21st Century, will be focusing on issues relating to decolonization in the arts. To learn more about the speakers, agenda, and to join the international gathering of arts professionals online, please also refer to our Asia Society website. For our members who are tuning in this evening, we thank you so much for your steadfast support, especially now. Your generosity nourishes our resolve to persevere despite these challenging times. And for those of you who are not yet members of Asia Society, we encourage you to become involved. Membership details may be accessed on our website. So now, it's my pleasure to introduce Morehshin Allahyari. She's an Iranian Kurdish media artist, activist, and writer based in Brooklyn, New York. Allahyari uses computer modeling, 3D scanning, and digital fabrication techniques to explore the intersection of art and activism. Her work has been a part of numerous exhibitions, festivals, and workshops at venues across the globe, including the New Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, the Venice Biennale di Architettura in Italy, and Museum für Angewandte Kunst, among many others. She's the recipient of the United States Artist Fellowship from 2021, the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant from 2019, the Sundance Institute New Frontier International Fellowship, and the Leading Global Thinkers of 2016 Award by Foreign Policy magazine. Allahyari has been awarded major commissions by the Shed, Rhizome, the New Museum, Whitney Museum of American Art, the Liverpool Biennial, and FACT. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Morehshin Allahyari this evening. Over to you, Morehshin, and thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction, and thanks to everyone out in the world who's watching, who's there. Also, I wanted to say thank you to Sarah and all the other staff members from Asia Society for putting together this event. At the beginning, we were hoping that this event could be in person, but because of complications with pandemic, we decided to host it online. But I really hope we can do a version of this at some point in real life. So for today, I wanted to kind of bring a little bit of focus and discussion and a tradition of Hamneshini, which word by word literally means sitting together, translated from Farsi, as a way to discuss some of our very different experiences in what has been this global pandemic, the last 1.5 years of our lives. I, as an artist living in Brooklyn, New York, but kind of constantly, being born, raised in Iran, and constantly being in touch with family members and relatives and friends in Iran, through this experience of, the pandemic, have tried really hard to not lose sight of what it means that I'm here, living the life that I'm living versus the lives of many other people in the world, around the world, including, again, stories and experiences that I have kept hearing about in Iran, which has been at points very, very difficult to know what to do with. Again, having the privilege of being where I am and my access to different resources, etc. So I want to start this event with showing a video piece that I made in 2016, end of 2016, as part of a work called She Who Sees the Unknown, in which I look at stories of forgotten, underrepresented jinn or monstrous figures that are female or genderless / queer within West Asian Islamic mythologies. And this work has been a 5-year work, a 5-year practice, and the last component of it just actually recently finished, which brought the work into summation. But this was the first video that I made, which tells a story of Huma, who's a jinn figure that brings fever into human body. And at the time, I was, thinking a lot about this connection between, bringing something like a feverish quality into human body, and then extending that to ideas around heat, the heat of the body, the heat of the planet. And then in the tradition of this series, She Who Sees the Unknown, one thing that I've been doing is that using whatever, let's say in this case, the jinn power is known as Huma, bringing fever, and then refiguring these stories to talk about different issues around our contemporary or in the future imagined, reimagined lives and realities, but also to use the power of these jinn figures and creatures as a way to turn around power structures. So writing the story of Huma, I kind of connected to the issues, the crisis of global warming, climate crisis, but then the injustice that we experience and we've been experiencing when we think about something like global warming, right? So we have this idea of, someone like Elon Musk suggesting that we go and colonize Mars, so leave the Earth. And then we have another perspective like, let's say, Haraway's discussion, which is that we have to stay with the trouble that we have created, rather than leaving what is there and then going somewhere else and colonizing it. We have to stay with it and think about ways to, again, resolve it, bring justice to it. But in my factual and fictional story writing about Huma comes to bring some kind of justice into both the experiences of the crisis like global warming and a crisis and solutions to this crisis. So before I kind of move on and tell you kind of about the connection between that and things that has happened in the recent year, and also invite our guests Nima and Angelina to do their reading, I want to show you the video, and then we will come back and discuss this further.
She who saw all things in a broadband earth and beyond, and knew what was to be known. She who had seen what there was and had embraced the otherness. She to whom the image clung like a mirror, a display of crisis, and who dwelt together with a devised becoming. She knows and sees the unknown and lays them bare. She is the monstrous other, the dark goddess, the possessive jinn, the dividing persona, the alternative figure. She restores myth and histories, the untold and the forgotten, the misread and uneven, those of and from the Near East. She is an inventor and a destroyer. She prescribes and rejects. In her city there was no outside, yet doors remained open and unlocked. Her name is Huma, she who is a flame and blaze. She's a jinn made of smokeless and scorching fire, among a race created by Allah prior to humans. From the very day of her birth, she was responsible for common fever, the fever of fevers, as they called it. The heat she brings to the human body is a symptom of an underlying condition, not a condition itself. Out into the world, she comes to possess earth and humans alike. In the whole universe, there was none better, none whom she, Huma, could not best. She leads all the burnings, looking up from the sun. She is a demon with 3 heads, 2 identical, vaguely equine, one looking right and the other left, leveled within an infinite horizon to see the disaster above her. The 3rd head faces forward, above the other 2, looking into the future. Her open legs with bent knees and open arms, suppressing all creatures. Great in respect, a monster in her form, she's the sight of the warm globe and the slowly burning human. Her 3 talismans are encountered frequently. One to simply summon and invoke her, to call and conjure her, chanting her name 7 times in a row. She enters from the most unforeseen openings. She bubbles up and out of the deep, dark bowels of the earth, forcing the heat of the desert to all she will possess, in favor of the rotting and heated bodies, airs, rocks, and oceans. Her 2nd talisman is to both bring and treat the fevered skin. One no one could elude, one she's the most worshipped for. She then extends her body to make all temperatures equal, above the normal on all surfaces, for the dehydrated and the unsuffered from drought. To rise and drop the existing catastrophe in all directions, from north to south and east to west, she looks into a reflection, giving a second self to her, one half cracking, the other nourishing the hosts, to colonize the colonizers, to occupy the occupiers. Of this body and these lands, she communicates with the diseased. She is a monster and should be. Her 3rd talisman, one she's the most feared for, one that will collapse all actuals, is the infectious madness. Rooted from the incurable heat, leading into chronic hallucinations, causing irritability, causing convulsions, causing sea-level sweat. All men gone mad by Huma, and no son was left sane to his father. And the gods cried out from this image the return of the repressed, the underprivileged. She, Huma, who shatters the unjust subject to expose symptoms, causing delirium, causing alienation, causing horizontal difference, causing universal blurring, causing immediate cruelty of nature, all to give birth to a parallel world between the ill and the healthy flesh.
So at the beginning of the pandemic, this was in March, a friend wrote me an email and she said that I have not stopped thinking about Huma, you know, kind of the fever and the bringing of this fever into human body, and what that means. And then she said that I hope that, you know, through this power of Huma, we can kind of find ways to get through what will become, you know, perhaps the reality of our lives. And this was, again, the very early days of the pandemic. And that kind of always stuck with me. But then as days like passed more and more, and then, you know, we started hearing news of other parts of the world and what was happening, I couldn't stop thinking about, again, these notions of inequality in a way that we experience crisis, right? So issues of race, which country you're living in, where you're from, how many families live in one household, right? Like if you live in a house that is just you versus like 2-3 families living in one home, how all those situations like really shape and change your experience of a crisis, in this case, global pandemic. And then, you know, it came the time for like vaccine. And, you know, we had the whole phase of selfies on Instagram and social media, especially, you know, this was like global North, in North America. It was this like sudden hype of like people getting vaccines and posting it on social media. And I remember reading a tweet that a friend and an artist, Gelara Khoshgozaryan, wrote, which was that American vaccine selfies are imperial violence. And, you know, that kind of, I think, summarizes what this kind of like notion of, again, sharing like an experience like that, and really kind of, I understand like the different reasons that people did it, but at the same time, I always like had this very like uncomfort about what that really meant to other people around the world who were like not even close to that experience of like, you know, having access to something like a vaccine. And then 3 months ago, Angeline and Nima and I were together in my like living room. Nima had come from Iran to get a vaccine. Again, him also having the privilege of having access to a citizenship, like American passport, you know, and being able to come to a country like the US to get a vaccine, versus a lot of people in Iran who don't even have that opportunity. But he came to get the vaccine and then, you know, stayed for a couple of weeks and then left and went back to Iran. And then at a time, Angeline had a plan to go to the Philippines and to spend, you know, from October to spend this time with her family members and relatives in the Philippines. And she could not go. Like now she would have to be in the Philippines doing this talk, but because of the lockdowns and situation getting like really intense right now in the Philippines, their experience was actually kind of in contrast of Nima's experience, was that they're vaccinated, but they could not enter this other place. And I kind of wanted to bring us together again and just sitting together of like casually discussing these situations and circumstances and experiences. And one thing that I have kept through these like past month and month, kind of reminding myself, something that I wrote at some point in my journal, was to never lose sight. And I think that's something that is why I wanted to do this event, why I wanted us to bring together, because of trying to rethink and refigure and rediscuss this phrase that we're all in this together, because the reality of it is obviously that we're not all in this together. And so for all those reasons, and to take this discussion also, hopefully with everyone's participation, also anyone who's like watching or here or want to participate, I would really love that after Nima and Angeline's reading, to hear your thoughts. But this is not to stay in the status quo. It's not to kind of be at the present, but to really discuss where do we go from here, right? So what did we learn about these days, these experiences? Everyone experienced different hardships, and by no means I'm trying to like ignore that, but also what did we learn about the inequality and different experiences of different people around the world, and then how can we use these experiences, these emotional reality, again, situations and days and experiences as a way to then respond or reimagine another type of future in which, when there is, obviously there will be some other kind of crisis, global crisis at some point. We know that. So, but what did we learn about the way that we can then react and respond to this as humans living in this world at this very moment? On that note, I'm gonna invite Angeline and Nima to read us the short readings and a little bit of explanation about their pieces and their thinking. I want to do a little bit of the official thing of like reading their bios, so bear with me here. Angelina Marie Michael Meitzler is a Filipino-American artist, writer, and software worker based in Brooklyn, New York. Their practice is centered in performance and semi-nonfiction, incorporating film, painting, and the web. Her work and research explores legacies of empire that inform economic value systems and 20th century expanded adoptions of colonialism that become embodied forms of dysmorphia and emancipation. Nima Behravan is a designer and researcher whose practice focuses on the relationships between ecology and the communication humans are seeking with nature. He uses tangible media and creates interactive installations in physical and virtual worlds to address collective actions towards social ecology. Behravan is a graduate of Master of Fine Art in Design and Technology at Parsons School of Design. With that, I want to open the stage to Angeline to do their talk and reading. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that intro, Morehshin. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump into my reading and then I'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards. 50 kilometers south from Manila, a landmass is born from a collision. It is 1572, and it is the year of the monkey. And two colliding forces produce the beginnings of more beginnings. Young and under the sun, the volcano is not yet a mother. Not yet a mother, but the heat of the fire is already an ember. The heat of the ember, I've tried to find it. It's been tried for, and I've tried against it. Whose was it before it was yours? Who was burned by it before it was you? Political domination, not yet the word for it. Economic inequality, not yet the word for it. I can remember the length of the heat and the words I couldn't understand. Over and over, I repeated them to myself, trying to decode them. Punta Cana. I don't have a memory of when they were said or what context they were said in. No visual reference or picture comes to mind. They're just engraved, written and rewritten, the words in their heat. Puñeta, through grit teeth, lucid heat. That was searching and tearing through the house into emptiness. Spit and embers deranged, my sister and I hugged the wooden floor underneath her bed. She holds a finger up to her lips, gesturing for me not to make a sound. Filipino anger, declared my half-Filipino high school boyfriend. You'll have it too. 2020 is the year of the rat. Everyone is asleep tonight except for the embers. Beneath the orange, yellow bulb from a street lamp, I see it there, the words in a million black dots. Two figures run past the light, their hands covering their mouth. Like rain, like a volley, a million pieces of blackened sand fall 150 kilometers south from Manila, and the volcano becomes a mother. It is March of 2021, and the Philippines is one of the last Southeast Asian countries to receive the initial vaccine replies. I'm over the phone with my mom. I'm going back in August if the border is open. Do you want to come with me? No, she says without a pause. Someone from my high school just went back and she passed away there. Why do you want to go home? Angry and sick, erupts and has erupted, 15 kilometers of steam and heat, tried and tired for it and against it, and within the volcano flames, I see it there. A dream to sleep, a wish beneath the fire's heat, regardless and against the evidence. So that's my reading. Kind of what I wanted to get at with this was kind of just my own experience and how that has been as a Filipino American that hasn't been born in the Philippines, but it's been born in America, and also just as like someone in the diaspora, I've just often felt like before even like this pandemic has happened, like that diaspora consciousness kind of already is always living in this state of loss and hope as kind of a defining aspect of being in the diaspora. And with this with this tension and this placement of the pandemic, I think, and in particularly in like case of the Philippines, which like as kind of Morehshin has mentioned, I was supposed to like be giving this talk originally in the Philippines, but through like the last like couple of months and just like continuously like checking like how the Philippines has been doing, and just like regularly just seeing like rising cases in COVID, and also kind of that just like also just reflecting on like my privilege of being in the US, and also kind of that kind of starting to like renegotiate also and rethink about my own ideas towards returning, towards like being on homeland, which again I think is often like a common feeling of nostalgia that people in the diaspora often experience. But yeah, and just in like this, like the state of the pandemic of also having to really like question and rethink that kind of state of nostalgia, and also like evaluating that feeling like amongst my family that is both here in the United States and my family that's also in the Philippines, and just like trying to understand like both, like if it makes sense to be there, and hearing on like both ends of the spectrum, like different, like my family there is really not wanting me to go out of like my own safety, or them being worried about my safety, and the same thing with my family here, and trying to also again kind of understand like where the sentiments are coming from, and hearing more about learning more and sharing more about like what the different experiences have been like, both in the hospitals here and in the hospitals in the Philippines. And like one of my bigger experiences like during this pandemic has like been in like getting sick during this time, and also like having to like figure out like my own IV situation, like while like while being in the hospital, and also like the hospital's been extremely busy, and then also like talking to a friend in the Philippines in Cebu who was also had to go to the hospital unfortunately like during this time, and hearing about her experience there, which was she was describing that she had to like find her own blood system, get her own like doctor's appointments, and basically have a whole team like help her beyond and outside of and inside of the hospital to like get anything to happen for her. So yeah, and so that is like I guess been a lot about what my experience has been like.
Thank you for that. We will, at the end, after Nima's reading, we will bring a lot of these points together. So I'm looking forward to more discussions on that. Thank you so much, Angelina. Nima, we're ready for you. I know it's by now, I think it's almost 3 a.m., right? In Iran. So thanks so much for showing up.
Salam, everyone. Thank you, Morehshin, for inviting me. My name is Nima Behravan, and I'm sitting together with you from Tehran. Yeah, it's already past midnight. It's about 3 a.m. here, and I'm awake and pleased to be in this Hamneshini with you. I've also kept my window open, whether we could hear the first rain of the fall in Tehran. To me, thinking of Hamneshini and listening to the rain right now could initially recall the poetic meaning of companionship between wind and cloud. It's nice to think of it as if wind brings the cloud in this part of the sky, or could it rain without any wind? wind and cloud may not sit together or run after each other from distances, but they form a Hamneshini as it recorded in memories. This is how sitting together in this Hamneshini with you, Morehshin, and Angeline cordially made me think about collective experiences during the pandemic, and of course, before that, in the past 2 years. Still, I would say I can't figure out a way to realize justice as it appears a bit intangible to me. Also, I can barely answer who are we talking about in this phrase, we are in this together. Does that sound like a proper question trying to make sense of our words at any scale? During this pandemic, everybody lost so many dear souls, and there were the unfortunate events experienced solely without any room left to tolerate them collectively. Let's be clear here, a new binary paradigm such as being associative or dissociative would not be necessary for us, for us being bounded together. Living in the pandemic with all the everyday cleansing chores still has its destructive effects on the brain. You may not be able to tell the difference between methods of taking care of your brain and thinking about the notion of caring capabilities and emotional intelligence at the same time. For example, I used to wash my hands every single hour. Then I would ask myself, what are the things that I don't want to take to the future? Is that from the cleansing or just future thinking? We may keep looking at the dark sky in the night to elaborate more on the question mentioned earlier, who are we in this together? I'm pretty sure you're not here tonight to hear things that you may already know of. With all due respect for every method of interconnection and community making for people with limited frameworks that this pandemic made them even worse. Now I want news and stories from life of the people I got to know in the past 2 years. Starting from the month of Aban of 1398, the bloody November of 2019, I mean. Following the protests for the increase of fuel price, internet blacks out all around Iran. On the other day, I see this guy on the street coming from Shahriyar, a city an hour away from Tehran. It's hell over there, he tells me. They are killing people on the streets and asking families to pay for the bullets. It's January 2020. Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 had been shot down by Iranian military forces, killing all 176 passengers and flight personnel. 3,000 people protested in Tehran with chants including death to the dictator. It's March 2020, 2 months after COVID has entered Iran. Only a week of lockdown starts with the announcement of the government officials by the end of March. October 2020, I read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. There is this story where the mosquito had asked Ear to marry him, whereupon Ear fell on the floor in uncontrollable laughter. How much longer do you think we will live? She asked. You are already a skeleton. Mosquito went away humiliated, and anytime he passed her way, he told Ear that he was still alive. January 2021, first COVID vaccination and immunization campaigns already started in the developed countries. Developing countries would definitely need to wait on the last stops. Maybe that's where capitalism ends? April 2021, the International Monetary Fund declares inflation in Iran to rise to 39% in the coming year. maybe it's not the matter of what does capitalism look like, but how does dependency and motivation evolve? June 2021, I wake up and electricity is gone in my house. So I go to work. Electricity is gone when I get to office. I decide to go to bazaar to do some shopping. Electricity is gone there as well when I get there. Maybe I go back home. I get to my house in the evening. Electricity is gone again the same day. July 2021. How many people died over protests for water shortage in Khuzestan? Or we would say the famine, the great famine over Iran, all over Iran. This is not the right time to ask what are the alternative approaches for managing land, water, and energy collectively? Famine is happening all around Iran and people are obliged to leave their lands. August 2021. I go to New York. I want to get my vaccine and I need to wait 2 weeks to get fully vaccinated before I fly back. So I do this quickly. I get to the vaccination center and I ask the lady to wait for a moment. I waited for 18 months. A lot of people died, so I could just have this only second. She responds, yes, that's life. September 2021, a friend of mine is searching for COVID drugs every single night for his parents. He tells me government spends 720 million euros to buy drugs for COVID. With this money, they could buy 200 million doses of vaccine. Summer 2021, out of 93 days of summer, Tehran's air was very polluted in 22 days, and the rest of the days were somehow clean. October 2021, about 30% of Iran's population got vaccinated. I concluded my reading with all these news and stories from before and during the pandemic in Iran. I just wanted to point out a few of the challenges people have to survive from before the pandemic and how it will continue intensely after the pandemic as well. This could go away as a wind passes through a cloud, or it can form a new cloud. We may notice them by rain, or we may just look up when they are not in the sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nima. It's, I'm just like sitting here trying to pass through all those like emotions, both listening to you and Angeline talking about, obviously with Iran, I've been following the news every day and knowing the news from here, but also not being able to like really imagine what it means, right? Like to wake up every day and then having to still make a day out of your life to go on and continue. And so I kind of like wanted to now bring all of us together and also like open this up to audience members, whoever who's out there. I'm supposed to be receiving comments, thoughts, questions, whoever who wants to be involved in any kind of like discussion. Again, I'm hoping that this is like much more of just a Hamneshini, sitting together, coming together, as Nima put it, a companionship, if any, some sort of allyship. So please feel free to participate and talk to us. And in the meantime, while I'm just waiting on some possible questions or thoughts or comments, kind of wanted to bring us all back into this space the question that I kind of sort of asked at the beginning. We know what we know, right? Like the whole conversation, a lot of it, you pointed out a lot of stuff, Angeline pointed out, in terms of building some kind of different ways of refiguration for moving forward, right? And I kind of want to ask both of you, and also I would like to also, you know, make some comments about that. But how do we move forward? What have we learned in a way that, again, if a similar situation happened, we would do maybe something differently, or the way we want things to go differently around the world. We have maybe some wish, some hope, some thought, in a way that we can reimagine the possibilities of something else in another way, that could become some kind of, I hate using the word kit, like KIT, but I sometimes think, you know, if I had to build a kit for something like this again in the future, and it was not objects or things, but rather thoughts, what would it be? So I would love to hear both of you and your thoughts about it.
Angelina, do you want to go first?
Sure. I guess for the kit, yeah, you know, I think kind of like what this whole event is about, like the stories that we bring with us are pretty, I feel like, I don't know, fundamental. Like it reminds me of like Octavia Butler's, you know, book. When she's creating like a survival kit, and it's like, yeah, more, you know, very like a super practical kit, but it's also, I think, really great exercise to think about what you would bring. And yeah, I definitely feel like yeah, some stories would be, I think, yeah, a big part of what I would like to bring. And also just like a thought on of like ways of, I guess, maybe like moving like forward here, or like, you know, from this particular predicament is like, I think also, again, in like talking from like the perspective of like being in a diaspora, is that like I think a lot of like, you know, just like the state of being in diaspora has like come out of like intense political domination and economic inequality, and the like can also like see like this like that this like, you know, diasporas and local communities as like as being a survival tactics in themselves.
One thing I want to kind of say is, you know, something that I kept like thinking a lot about, again, was this super kind of intense difference, or like very like binary kind of situation between global North and global South, right? And the access that then became such an important part of what our lives meant. Right, Nima mentioning in a place like Iran, in a country like Iran, only 30% of the population are vaccinated. This is October 2021, where in a country like the US, they are literally begging people to come get vaccinated. They're paying people in some states to get vaccinated. If, you know, let's just say vaccination as one solution. I don't want to get into, you know, that discussion of what that means, like how immune our bodies are really, etc. But just as something you have an option for, and as a resource that you have access to. And I think, if any, you know, my wish for the allyship, something I want in that kit, is for allyship of people who have access to things, who live in countries, situations, lives that are obviously, again, have been difficult during pandemic. Is to be more kind about day-to-day ways of thinking, talking, participating on social media. You know, there was a point I really had to like hide people on my social media that would share the vaccine picture. Like I just start like, and this was the time that like these like intense amount of news was coming out of Iran, where people were just dying left and right. I just could not like imagine, what that means for someone who's like scrolling on their Instagram in a place like that, and then like coming up with these images of this vaccination, and then people like some weeks later sharing, videos of partying and hanging out and being together, and so that's kind of how I want to live my life, to kind of constantly think about others as much as possible. It's a very hard practice. I don't think anyone can be perfect at it. Definitely I'm not perfect at it. But to kind of just, again, that thing that I said, to not lose sight and to kind of understand what our actions mean to other people when we are in crisis. And maybe, I don't know what we can do when we have access, like what are the ways that we can be involved in other people's lives beyond just thinking about this self-celebratory of our privileges, right? So that's my one wish. Nima.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how to put this together. Let's put it this way. I remember talking to you a few years ago about how, all these tech companies should be doing ghost learning instead of machine learning, and how this world is going through about learning intelligence. And today I was thinking, do we have a notion called caring intelligence or something like that? These are just like words that we can play with, but in order to like answer your question, I also want to take note of Angeline's point. Living in the diaspora could somehow relate to how people want to care about the people in their homelands. For example, I know a lot of stories about Iranians in diaspora and how they want to get involved in like political scene of Iran. But it's just living through the pandemic made me think about how you can participate in a system that you are not inside of it, but you're outside of it. And at the end, it just made me think that maybe people are just left to choose between politics or self-destruction, or is it just like politics of destruction? I don't know, it's very hard to say. I think about these kind of controversial moments a lot. Like, let's say we have another pandemic coming because of a virus that transmits through water. What do we get to do? Do we get to stay home, or should we get outside to look for fresh water? I think it's just a matter of how we want to make structures based on trust and care. And the experience of Iran told me that if we make any mistakes in order to make those structures, how do those structures become a kind of practice field for powers such as government to practice their authority, as it is the prevailing scene of any government. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I answered that properly, but to me, authority and how it obliges people to choose between situations, it's so bold. And I think that could be the initial step for us in order to make sense of the worlds that we are living in. And yeah, I think people have people, and that's the only thing that we can rely on.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of thinking about, you talked about binaries and kind of, I think, those relationships, and kind of going back to it, the tweet that I said, artist Gelar Khoshguzaran made, which was imperialistic violence, right? calling, she was saying that the selfies are a form of imperialistic violence. And I think about that. I think about different notions of violence, right? Like living in America, in North America, and how regardless of people's situations and, a lot of time, class, race, etc., gender, whatever, I think there is a comfort about being American in a way that always gets lost in, again, America's influence on America being like literally the imperialist country, but like also like having influence on a lot of shit that is going on in other countries, and for these like super complex like political situations, and then like play a role in how people experience a life, let's say in a place like Iran under sanctions of the US, right? So, and let's say the plane crash, right before the pandemic happening because of the conflict between the US and Iran. And like, again, these like very twisted, complex situations and realities playing this role in day-to-day lives of people, let's say in Iran. And I can imagine, obviously, many other countries that like are under these circumstances because of America. And then being an American, being a citizen of this country, being woke, being, politically aware, this, that, but still like there's a place where like, again, for me, America loses sight. And that's when it like really hurts, because I'm like, you too, like you are like, a person that I'm like really close to, and you're my friend, and you're this and that, and know all the right words and politically correct things to say. And like how people just lose sight within, again, when it comes to these ways of living lives and being so dissolved into the lives that they live, that it becomes okay or easy or dismissive to have these kind of forms of, again, more indirect, more invisible violences toward each other, but each other's emotions are like beings, well-beings, mental health beings. So those are the things, when I was told to do this event, it was supposed to be about the pandemic or like some experience of the pandemic. And all I wanted to do was to talk about the things that hasn't really as much been talked about. Again, in North America, like we can just complain and talk about all the hardships of it. Obviously, people have lost friends, family members. This does not mean that I'm dismissing that at all, but again, I really feel like the only way forward is for us to understand what this has meant to those of us with certain accessibility and privileges, and what does it mean to move forward within these realities, within these experiences. So yeah, that's just been, I guess, on my mind a lot. We have a question. Someone says, do you have a new relationship with your art as a result of experiencing the pandemic? So, or your practice, any of you? Angelina, I think it's your turn.
I'm just reflecting on everything you just said. Just to touch on that, like what you just said really quick though, I like that also just, really also reminds me of, sending, like in the Philippines, like they're like have just, a lot of my family particularly has like been like not being able to work and having their, not being able to make money for like their family. And that's due like to like the lockdowns there, and like them not being able to go to work on a regular basis, but how also like just like the system that's already been in place for a while of just like sending money to the Philippines, also just like even in doing that and like trying to send help to family members, it also just like at least in my back of my head, like there's like this like reinforcement of also like the economics of the Philippines not being there to support its own people, and continuously like relying on that. So anyways, that just reminded me of that. But to answer your question about
I just kind of like want to say this, that like this past, the history of years and years of colonization, right? And other forms of, again, complicated political relationship between US and Iran, and like examples like sanctions in the case of the Philippines, examples of, again, historical, cultural colonization of the Philippines. Like all those things are there. Like all those things are what has made the contemporary situation, the present. And then something like a global pandemic happens. And for either of us, like, again, living in a country that in this case is the source of, I could also talk about a country like the UK in so many ways, but like just focusing on where I am right now. But in a place like this, to kind of, to be a citizen of it, an aware citizen of it, and be able to turn your back on it or just like not see it, that's, to me, that again has been the complication of like, we are experiencing things in a way that we're experiencing this in different countries. People are experiencing things in a way that they're experiencing in different countries. Also, because of this long history of war and colonization that America has been a part of, right? So all that plays a role. And then when a crisis happens, and then the way people can get to have to deal with it. And yeah, so again, something that I could not unsee in a lot of these conversations. So the relation between your art, I'm sorry to cut you off on that.
You're good. That's good. I was just going to say that I think, probably like also a lot of people that's just kind of been pushed more in a digital direction for sure throughout this time, and just in being connected to people.
Nima. You are muted.
Muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. So I wanted to go back to what you were talking, Morehshin and Angelina, before, and also answer the question. So I'll quickly answer the question. Yes, because, living as an artist, which I cannot imagine in Iran, I always thought I'm a designer and a researcher, although I studied art. It just like living through the pandemic and experiencing just made me realize that I have to do what I want to do and make a living as what I'm doing right now in Iran, because that may be a new story influencing other people in Iran that want to do what they want. So yeah, that made me realize that I should and I must do whatever it takes to reach my goals. So that being the answer to that question. But also, Morehshin, I really wanted to say the point that you made, it's a bit frightening. Like, let's put it this way, think about the situation of Afghanistan and what happened like in the summer. Yeah. Let me put it this way. Yeah, there are sanctions. The living under the sanctions are terrible, and everywhere you go, not only the government but also the people, they make any kind of excuses because of the sanctions. Like, let's say you go somewhere and you want to buy a new device, they say it's expensive because of the sanctions. You go somewhere, the inflation is going up because of the sanction. They say the currency prices are going up because of the sanctions. But that's what I wanted to make it clear in my reading, that these problems were happening in Iran even before the pandemic or even before the sanctions. And yeah, for sure, sanction made them worse and also made them as a new kind of problem and a challenge in people's lives. But also, let's not think about it as a kind of a wave of resistance of like we should only think about image of the imperialism just because of what happened in Afghanistan. Like, US has played a big role in to make countries feel devastated, and then they don't feel responsibility for what they've done before, and they are like, okay, everybody has forgotten about this in the past 20 years, so let's just say bye, we are out. And somehow this image is also frightening of a lot of countries are dependent on what US decides, and at the same time that they know that they don't want this power to be, on top of their head. So as I said before, I cannot imagine to make sense of these worlds at the same time, of how we can relate to each other in different situations. But also, I think we need to still think about making structures at like these big scales. Like we need to first make a lot of functions properly and then think about how we can distribute it or how we can get people involved in it. Yeah, so yeah, first things first.
And obviously, in case of many of these places, it's not just US influencing only the place. It's like the case of also the corruption of the countries and the governments of these places. And, it's always within this, you're always stuck between two corrupted systems that are in different ways are going against each other. And then you're just kind of, in between it. So yeah, that's definitely part of that reality. We have to end soon, but I want to give both of you an opportunity for like any final thoughts, or anything that you feel like we didn't have a chance to touch on that you want to add before we finish this.
Not particularly, just thank you all. It was great talking to you. Again, would be great to be in the same room, but this is great too.
Yeah, same to me. It was lovely to meet you again after 3 months, and I would love to continue our conversations. And it was great to having me here. And thank you, Asia Society. Thank you, Morehshin, for having us, and thank you, Angeline, for your nice words. Thank you so much.
Yeah, same. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here, to you and Angeline for sharing your beautiful stories. And again, to everyone at Asia Society and to everyone who's watching, I don't know who you are. We really, I'm putting it out there, Asia Society, we have to do this event in real life at some point. Like, I want a version of this in real life. Like, I really think I was craving for that way of coming together in like a casual way, sitting around each other with everyone out there who's like maybe watching this, and being able to share this in much more of like a caring companionship, allyship, and if any, and also not us just being the speakers, but like rather like really feeling like we're thinking together, sharing stories together, and like Donna Haraway says, worlding together. So hopefully one day soon. Thanks so much. Bye.